go. Torah Od Yisro, page Ayin Dalid, first column, 11 lines from the bottom of the first column. Okay, now the Rebbe is explaining that the purpose of Matan Torah is Gashmius, unlike the others that only did it in Ruchnius. And he says that why do mitzvahs have the ability to bring down this essential level of Elokus? So he starts explaining about Korbanos. He says, Yishay Reach Nichayach LaHashem. Reach Nichayach is Momata L'mayla, Reach goes up. Then it says Nichayach is P'chais Darga coming down. The whole inyan of Torah mitzvahs is Ratzav V'Sheik. So Avraham Avinu did it on his own because he was great, and we need the Torah mitzvahs to do it. So now the last thing the Rebbe was explaining, that why is it that Gashmi's Dika mitzvahs are able to reveal this great level of Elokus? So he says, because Gashmi's comes in the world of Tehu, and that's why we're able to sustain ourselves from Tehu. But down here, it became very coarse, very nizgashim, the food. And he says, that's why even though this we're up to now, he says, afilu tzaddik she'echel l'seva nafshi, even a tzaddik that eats only for his nefesh, meaning doesn't eat for the gashmis of it, he eats for the ruchnius. It would have been better if he didn't eat. Like he says, therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, he didn't eat in the mountain all 40 days. I didn't even eat food. Especially on Har Sinai was a super high level. It's an extremely great level. So why didn't he want to eat? He said, because of the coarseness of the food. Avraham Maradi is sponsoring the class today. Thank you. He didn't even eat man in heaven. Shenikra lechem abidim, the lechem of the strong ones. Shemalach eshars nizonim mimenu. It says that the malachim sustain themselves in the man. Even that loy achal ish. The lechem abidim loy achal ish. That means even the man Moshe Rabbeinu didn't eat. Why didn't he eat in Har Sinai? He wanted to reach a level higher than the malachim. So the malachim can eat spiritual food called the man, that didn't have any waste, didn't have any coarseness to it, no mundane, nothing. But the pearl, Moshe Rabbeinu wanted even to reach a higher level, and therefore he didn't eat. Okay, so therefore now the Alter Rebbe is going to ask the question. The Alter Rebbe asked the question at the beginning of the paragraph, why wasn't Torah given to Avraham Avinu? If the whole purpose of Matan Torah is to elevate the physical world, why didn't he give it to Avraham Avinu? So he says, therefore the Torah wasn't given yet in the days of Avraham. The world wasn't refined yet. Again, you didn't have the Aved of the office. You didn't have the Aved of Golus Mitzrayim. You didn't have the refinement of a world. The Liyesam Shachas until Baruch Maisa Mitzvahs Gashmias, that it should bring down Elokus through Gashmias. Shenilkuchu Mitachas Memshos Klipas Nega, that became that Gashmias became under the jurisdiction of evil. But therefore, V'lo Yicholim Lekabel Ha'oris. Therefore, they couldn't be called anything connecting to Hashem. In other words, the Alter Rebbe is explaining, you need Yitzias Mitzrayim, and he's going to explain why. Shemitzrayim Kura Barzel. Kura Barzel means like the iron combs. He says, like Mitzarif L'Kesef V'Kur L'Zav. In other words, you need to refine silver and gold to get rid of all the sediment, all the junk of it. Impurity. This Kura Barzel, this comb or a strain or whatever. Separate so just like the cord, like the pasuk says, mitzaref lekesef, it refines the silver. Cord habarzel is what's refining the Yid. V'kachu cord habarzel shezich ches Yisrael. It refined the Yidden. Aidekushi yashibut through the difficulties of the slavery. To separate bad from good. And then it will be separated all the corruption. Who call a call of a never meaning. Through the evil becomes separated. Like it says, in other words, like this. When a Jew eats kosher food, okay, what you do is you basically are separating the spark of kedusha in it from the klipa. An apple, yeah, it's kosher, so it's not shalosh klipsa tameis, it's klipa snaiga. So what happens when a Jew eats an apple with a bracha properly, or any food, yeah? So in it is the kedusha, spark of kedusha in the apple, but the apple is klipa snaiga. It's the shell, the peel, right?
Pomegranate is a better example.
Anything. Okay, it doesn't matter. So the point is that what do? You separate, when you eat the apple, you take away the good from the bad. That's called birir anitzutzis. You separate the good from the bad. The evil falls away, and the good is elevated to kedusha. In order for the Jews to receive matan Torah, they needed that level of Korah Bars, and therefore Avraham Avinu couldn't get the Torah. Because mitzvahs have the ability, because mitzvahs are done with klipas naiga, to elevate and separate the good from the bad, and elevate the gashmis to kedusha. Every mitzvah.
Rabbi Shushan, can we? Is the Rebbe is trying to tell us that anything happening in one's life, if you lose it because you weren't refined to receive it, it's not because you made a mistake.
No, we're supposed to refine ourselves to do it.
Why? What if let's say I could never condemn myself why I didn't buy this house? Because I was not deserved worthy at that time to get
in
that.
spiritual terms, what are you talking about the house?
You didn't buy a house because Hashem didn't want you to have it.
Right.
Why? Because that house is not your avodah to elevate it. Somebody else's avodah is to elevate it.
Give the money for the synagogue to finish the synagogue, not the house. Yeah?
In other words, he's not talking about what you're talking about. Here he's talking about you elevate Gashmias. So in Avraham Avinu's time, the world wasn't ready enough it wasn't refined enough to be able to separate the good from the bad. Okay. But in Bechlal and these things, the fact, and if you stop to think, it's really remarkable. People don't think, that's the problem. You have a plate full of tangerines. Yeah? You take this particular tangerine. You took it because it's on top. You know, it's on top, so you took it. The truth is, from the beginning of creation, the Eibusher made that when you came to this table, that particular tangerine was on top for you to elevate. Not somebody else. For you to elevate. Therefore Hashem put it where it is. Somebody else. In other words, so you buy a house. Why did Eibusher make you buy the house? That house. Because that house is your avodah to elevate. Another house not. But that couldn't happen in Avraham Avinu's time, because Avraham Avinu's time the world wasn't refined enough to be able to do that.
Hashem couldn't match to somebody for the grain.
Yeah.
At that time he couldn't, right?
He did, the guy messed up.
Right, but at the time Avraham Avinu.
No, in that time, in Avraham Avinu's time it couldn't happen.
And Adam and Isaac did not see it. Ishaq did not see it.
Adam and Yitzchak,
Yeah.
with what?
They wanted to finish the war. They wanted to be
But they
did
tried.
Not see, they did not see.
They did see, but they said, let's try. Maybe it'll work. It's not ready yet, but let's go. Maybe it'll work. Kikola, and therefore he says, oh, Kamashal Luka, It's those little bloodsuckers. They leech. Good one. He says shemetzet is dam ha'adam miyad mesa. It's like as soon as it takes out the blood, it dies. Or like a bee stings you, it dies. Shenizdachu Yisrael. And therefore, when the Yidden became refined through Mitzrayim, nizdachach gam kin ha'elam v'gashmiyus v'chumer yusef. And then, when the Yidden became refined, so did the whole Gashmius and Chumius of the world. Why? Ki kol ha'elam tola b'Yisrael. Because the entire world is dependent on the Yidden, like it says, ha'elam nasem b'libam. Hashem put the whole world in the heart of the Jews. Then, as I nizbaru gam kin mitzvahs maisis. Then physical mitzvahs are able to be refined. Lias nikra b'shem mitzvah, that it should be called mitzvahs. Shebahem va'yadum tiyam shachas so baruch throughout that allows the revelation of Hashem. Why? Because like we learned, mitzvahs are the limbs of Hashem. What does it mean, the limbs of Hashem? The limb brings down the koyach of the neshama for that particular koyach. So a Jew, through a particular mitzvah, reveals that level of elukus.
So Rabbi, the Goyim aren't so wrong when they say the Jews run the world. Hashem runs the world.
Of course we run the world. We're the chosen people. They mean we run the world politically and financially. That's not the truth. The truth is Yidden run the world because everything that happens in the world is up to the Yidden.
So spiritually we run the world?
Of course we run the world. What do you mean? We run the world physically too.
What do you mean?
Who controls all the money in the yeah. But all these statistics. So what? The percentage of the number of Jews in the world, the percent of Jews in the world compared to the control that Jews have over the money, and it's unbelievable. And he says, by gamachilas karbanis, like eating of the carbon, akravis minchas selas, shem mitzameach hu ish ereich nichach laHashem. And he says, and he said, and the Alter Rebbe just says in the parentheses, even though the Avis also brought korbanos, but he says no, they didn't bring korbanos. They only brought korban oila, v'leizvachem necholim v'leiminchas mishem tzemeach. The Avis didn't eat any carbon they brought. It was all korban oila. They didn't bring flour offerings. Now we can elevate the animal by eating it. We can elevate the flour offering by eating it. Okay, now we can understand. The Alter Rebbe says now a very good thing. Interesting thing. Now we can understand many questions that are mentioned in Sfarim. Again, Lama Nasa Yaakov Beis Achias. Why did Yaakov marry two sisters when you're not allowed to? Va'amram Nasa Deidasi. And Amram married his aunt, which after Matan Torah was forbidden. He says, Kar Golus Edem. So therefore the same thing now, Golus Edem, is Korah Barzo. To be through this Yemesa Mashiach, like we learned in the other Maimer. Just like in Mitzrayim, the whole purpose of Shibud Mitzrayim, the slavery, was to get Matan Torah. The whole purpose of slavery now of Golus is to come to Mashiach. And because Mashiach's revelation is greater, we're not doing it in 210. We're doing it 3,000 plus. Gives much greater Avodah. Because all opinions say mitzvahs won't be bottled. And the mitzvahs will become even more refined. Like it says in Maamarim Dayam, the same thing, that's generally speaking. Now he says, anytime a person suffers in this world, it refines him. It refines them. Dayain.
So Rabbi, if I don't suffer, I'm not going to go to fine?
But you, it doesn't matter if you do or not.
That's what. I guess that's why.
No, it really doesn't matter. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, the Nachsil and Yanenu, let's go. Next paragraph, find out, second column. The Nachsil and Yanenu, okay, so now the Alter Rebbe asked the question before about Eish and Mayim coexisting, and he says that's Ratcha v'Sheiv, and he says the whole inyan of Matan Torah mitzvahs is to have the Ratcha v'Sheiv, because Torah has Eish and Mayim, Reach Necheach, smell going up, fire, and the water coming down. He says, Ach, Eich Yeshnei Havchem Eish Mayim. But now the question is, if Torah is fire and water, how can fire and water coexist? It's impossible for fire and water to coexist. He said, this is what we say. Shalom b'mreimov. Yad Hashem makes peace on high between Michal and Gavriel, between Mayim and Eish. Shalom ukelu beis havchem. By definition, peace is when there's two opposites joining together. That's the definition of peace. You can't have a peace treaty with yourself. Peace treaty means there's two opposites and you make peace, they join together in one.
So that's Tiferes.
Huh?
That's Tiferes.
That's the concept of Tiferes.
But if you're conflicted inside and you bring peace, so
Huh?
if you're conflicted inside and you bring peace,
That's your Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. It's also two separate things. Okay, so he says, Shalom is kele beis havchem. And he says, because how could Shalom make peace between two opposites? So the answer is very simple. He's above both. If he's above both, then they're both equal, so he can make peace. That's the purpose of the Shofar. The Alter Rebbe asked at the beginning of the Maamarim, what was the purpose of the Shofar? What do you think, a musical accompaniment? There's much better instruments than a Shofar. He says, what's the inyan of a Shofar? He says, Shofar taken eisi mipiv hakotzer, v'akol yetzim misracha v'yesiv b'sefer b'makom erachak. How does Shofar blow? You blow on the narrow side of the Shofar, and the sound comes out from the wider side of the Shofar. Right? Therefore, halachically, if you have a big mouth and you blow from the wide side, you're not yotzer. It has to dafka be like it says. Out of the affliction, oppression. I call you Anani B'Merch Pirush. What does it mean? Min HaMeitzad Mokim Tzad. Sheina Musig, a narrow place which is not understood. V'les Machshava Tfisa Beit. And no man can possibly grasp Hashem. Shulamayla Mikol HaSaga, which is above any possible understanding. V'inyan Shofar. And that's the whole inyan of Shofar. Shofar. Shapru Maseichem, better your ways. Mamshich Tainuk. He says like this. Avu Ba'atzme who call Parshat is Moker HaTanugim. The Rebbe explains like this. Shofar basically is also two opposite things. You have Min HaMeitzad, from the narrow, from the oppression, and then you have the Merchav of the Shofar. And he says, what is Shofar, the concept of Shofar? Word Shofar means, Shapru Ma'aseichem, better your ways. Better your way, make it become better. That's the word Shapir means better. And he says, that's the simplistic sound of the Shofar that awakens the Tainug. It's like, in a practical sense, the cry, a person's cry, touches deeply to the core. Like the Kukuriku story, or all these other things. When a baby cries, or like the Moshe, the Baditcheva gives, the king's son left and got the language and everything, he comes back, and they're not even letting him in. But he goes to the window and he cries, and he hears the sound of the cry. That's above language. That's essence. And therefore, Matan Torah, which needs to combine two opposites, meaning it's a level above both, it has to come from the essence. And that's the sound of the Shofar. The sound of the Shofar is combining Meitzar and Merchav, two opposites. Narrow, wide, affliction, broadness. And that is what the Shofar does, which is really the concept of Matan Torah. The concept of Matan Torah, he says, is combining Eish and Mayim, combining Ruchnis and Gashmis, combining everything together. That's what the Shofar represents, the cry of the soul.
Through the hardship.
Abraham and Moshe Rabbeinu.
Huh?
Abraham's generation and Moshe Rabbeinu.
Avram's generation couldn't do it because it wasn't refined.
No, the Mesa,
No, but I'm saying Avram Avinu's generation couldn't do this.
But the Rebbe is saying that it has to be through the hardship. Otherwise,
Correct.
Otherwise, it's not going to.
That's
It has
the
to go from the very narrow.
correct. Because that awakens the essence.
The olive presses.
The whole right. You gotta squeeze it, and you gotta do it, and the whole union of Golus is not something negative. It's just a refining process. So what the Rebbe was screaming is the refining process is done already. The suffering is done, the torturing is done, the refinement is done, the buttons are already polished. The Rebbe said you have to polish the buttons. The Rebbe said already many times the buttons are also polished. So what are we waiting for? In other words, why is Hashem waiting? And from Misham, Min HaMeitzar, right? Meaning from the Meitzar. Karasi Yud Ke Yud Ilah, the level of Chachma. And Hey Ilah Bina, which is Recheves Hanar, Recheves Hadas, B'Mashem is Beinim. Okay? So he says, that's the level of Chachma and Bina is Meitzar and Merchav. Chachma is the spark, it's nothing, there's nothing there. And Bina is the understanding. So therefore, that brings down the level of Chachma and Bina. Meitzar and Merchav. It's the level of Yudkei. Therefore it says, Anani B'Merchav Yudkei, doesn't say B'Merchav Yudkei Vavkei. Because Min HaMeitzar is Chachma Yud, and Merchav is Hey. So Min HaMeitzar, Karasi Yudkei, Anani B'Merchav Yudkei. It's the level of Chachma and Bina. What?
Shofar is like Shifra, right? Make straight.
Shapru, better.
Not to make straight, because Shifra is make straight, right? Kua and Shifra, Shifra would make him straight and Kua would go poof.
No, Rashi says it beautifies the kid. It beautifies the kid. That's what the midwife does. It cleans up the kid, you know. Hainu misham ascholas is havas chochma ve'eden v'teira. Lias la'adel l'shamra. To be gan, Eden. V'gili tainu v'asogas gashmis ayidei zeh anani b'merchav yudkei. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe is explaining two things. Why wasn't Torah given to Avraham Avinu? Because the world wasn't ready. Why was there Shofar by Matan Torah? Because the whole union of Matan Torah is to combine Eish and Mayim. So you have to tap into a greater level, and that's the level of Shofar. Meitzar and Merchav, Shapru Maseichem, to connect two opposites. And therefore Shofar is the cry of the heart, in all different sounds of Shofar, by the way. Even Shvarim is the moaning and groaning, and the truas, the crying. All this touches the core to make the combination between Eish and Mayim.
In order for there will be a peace, you said it has to be higher than the two levels.
Correct.
During the peace. So are you saying that Tefiras is higher than Chesed?
Yes.
and Gevurah?
Yes,
Therefore Yaakov is higher than Isaac and
Correct.
Abraham?
correct. Because in order to combine two opposites, you
Has
need
to
to...
be higher.
Right.
I thought it has to be in
The
the middle.
Chassidus explains the Purim story, which is a nest in nature. It's Mordechai, Esther, Muse, and that was in Kriyas Yamsuf, you know. It was...
It's unbelievable. There is hope after all.
There is hope after all.
even for me,
No.
No,
We're speaking about him, not you.
Don't push it.
Yeah, don't push your luck too much. Because Chassidus explains, you have a miracle and you have nature. They're two opposites. Yeah? So, contrary to public belief, if you ask somebody, what's a greater miracle? Purim or Kriyas Yamsuf? They'll tell you Kriyas Yamsuf is a greater miracle because it's... Purim is in nature a little bit. Chassidus explains it's the opposite. To combine miracle and nature, you have to tap into a level above both. So it's a greater miracle when it's in nature because you're combining two opposites.
So when the pregnancy
So
happened with the Rebbe,
Tiferes is, that's why, okay, it says
go to the
in the picture, in the Kabbalah picture, you have right, left, center, right? Chochmah bein das chesed gvura Tiferes netzach you say the Malchus, right? Now, you have the right side, which are interconnected, and you have the left side. The middle side, it says Kava Amtsai Elad, keeps going up and up. And you find this in the Mishkan. The top board, the three poles that held the Mishkan together. Right? The top pole held this wall together. The bottom one held this wall together, same wall. And then those two beams held, but the middle one went through straight all around, because that's Emes, Titin Emes for Yaakov, because Yaakov is the level of Emes. Why? Because Kava Emtsoi goes L'mayla Mala Aden Ketz and L'mata Mata Aden Tachas. It goes all the way up and all the way down. And that's the uniqueness of Kava Emtsoi. So therefore, all middle levels, even though seemingly Chesed Gvur Tiferes is lower. Netzach Yesod seemingly is lower, but because they're the middle pole, the middle side of the picture, and it goes all the way up. Because Emes goes all the way from the top to the bottom. Maila, and Ketz, the Gimbasi Lagani, we learned this here, but the highest all the way up and all the way down. So it's lower but higher. Therefore, Avram had Yishmael, and Yitzchak had an Esav, and Dafka Yaakov, all his children were tzaddikim.
Hi, Mom.
Technically, there is no lower or higher.
There is higher and lower, but higher and lower means more revelation, lower revelation. The Rambam says, when you have, the Pasuk says, Srafim aim the Mimal, the Srafim stand above the Ifanim. The Rambam Hilstays, you say the Torah, because you say the Torah says, it's not higher and lower, there's no physical space. And now one's in the first step, one's in the 10th step. What it means is spiritually greater. They have a greater understanding.
more revelation.
More revelation is called greater, higher. Lesser level revelation is called lower.
This was